Good afternoon. I want to thank Joe Segrist and the Purple Martin Conservation Association for inviting me to speak today. I'm Dr. Jason Fischer. I'm a conservation programs manager with Disney Conservation and with Disney's Animals, Science and Environment. As I was thinking about this presentation and about this conference, something really stood out to me about the time and place that our society is at. We are at a point of extremes. We're at a point of division. Pick a topic, and so many people are going to fall on opposite ends of how they feel about that particular topic. But if you look at this particular conference, we have people from across an incredible range of different demographic parameters, and yet we are all united in the desire to conserve and make a difference for this remarkable bird. Now that is incredible, and I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that topic over the course of this talk. Before I go, though, I wanted to give you a little bit more background about who I am and what Disney Conservation is all about. I am a field biologist, a field ornithologist by training and by trade. I started out my career in Arizona, where I worked for the Arizona Game and Fish Department studying the southwestern willow flycatcher. And I spent a fair number of years as a wildlife consultant as well. Now, those experiences put me at the interface of nature or of undeveloped areas and areas that were either undergoing development or were already developed. And I became fascinated by the way that nature and people interacted, at the way that wildlife was either able to adapt and thrive in developing landscapes, or they failed to do that, and how sometimes human intervention could help influence and improve a particular species' ability to make that adaptive switch to a place where there are thriving and developed areas. Now that motivated my graduate research, focusing in on the urban ecology of birds. And once I graduated, the Walt Disney Company hired me to oversee our avian conservation projects for birds. Now, when people hear the name, the Walt Disney Company, conservation usually isn't the first thing that pops to mind. But that conservation ethos is really at the core of who and what we are. And that goes all the way back to our founder, Walt Disney. And he once said, "You've probably heard people talk about conservation. Well, conservation isn't just the matter of a few people, it's a matter that concerns all of us." And if you look at his body of work, you can see that he was really a pioneer in trying to connect people with nature through the lens of entertainment. So a lot of his early films focused in on animation of wildlife. And he really popularized the nature documentary through some of his true life adventure series. Now we try and continue on that legacy, both in animated films and in nature documentaries today. And we've expanded out to creating places where people can connect with wildlife as well, like at Disney's Animal Kingdom, where I'm at right now. But we also have a team dedicated to conservation, Disney Conservation. And our mission is to full-time carry out and expand that legacy of Walt that focuses on conservation. Now we have three main areas of focus. One is on saving wildlife through collaborations with other outstanding organizations. Now, a lot of that work happens through the Disney Conservation Fund, the philanthropic arm of our company that gives dollars to help support amazing organizations doing amazing things throughout the world. Then there's the inspiring action component of what we do. In all of our work, whether it is with Disney employees, whether it is with Disney audiences, whether it is with those other organizations, we want to work together to help inspire and empower communities to make a difference where they are. And finally, protecting the planet. In those places where Disney employees live and work, we want to be leaders in trying to make a difference for those habitats, for those species where Disney is operating. And now it's in that final bucket that the Purple Martin project, which is one of the projects that I oversee, really started. We're going to be spending a lot more time talking about that over the course of this talk. Before we go there, though, I wanted to end on, or I wanted to follow up with this thought. Disney is inherently a company of hope. We don't want to pretend like times aren't hard. You look out and you see the declines in biodiversity, you see the challenges that nature is facing, and those are serious and those are severe. But we believe that by looking at those challenges with a lens of hope, we're able to mobilize people to action more quickly and more effectively. And it's in that vein that we started a new campaign this Earth Month called Disney Planet Possible. And the idea is that let's dream big, let's think big about what's possible, bold, ambitious goals for the future that can motivate and drive us towards doing more than we thought we could to make a difference in this world and create places where wildlife and people are thriving together. And to me, that's really at the heart of what this conference is all about. You know, purple martins have this capacity, have this ability to connect us and motivate change and impact and action in a much bigger and greater way than often seems possible at first blush. Now, for those of us that have worked with purple martins, that incredible connection that purple martins can foster comes as no surprise. You know, those of us that are landlords, we see these purple martins arriving, those insects start being delivered, and we know magic is happening inside those compartments. For people that are nest monitors, we know and we've experienced when you lower down these houses, you open up and you see these chicks that are just newly born, eyes not open yet. And we get to watch over the course of the nesting season as they begin to get bigger, as those eyes begin to open. And it's not long at all before the feathers start growing in as well. And all along the way, there is that connection, that powerful connection between people and between martins. And that connection inspires and motivates action. And it's not long at all until those chicks are grown. They're coming right to the front of those nesting compartments. And then we get to see those chicks take their first flight and fledge out to create and support the next generation. Now we get to watch that play out in front of us as landlords. But something much bigger happens beyond just ourselves when other people come alongside, see that, experience that. That creates connection between us as people, between us and that species, that special species, purple martins, and that in turn inspires us to take additional action. Now this creates this impact cycle that repeats over and over, and each time it circles, you get bigger and bigger impact. And I want to use the story of Disney in conjunction with purple martins to see how that plays out. Now, one of the best things about this is not driven by one single group, one single partner. In other words, this is not the story of everything that Disney has done. Rather, it's the story of actions taken, sometimes by Disney, sometimes by collaborators, and how that cycles through this impact cycle to create bigger and better change next. So we're going to do that in two different ways. First, we're going to start local to Walt Disney World and see how that has expanded out into the areas surrounding us in Central Florida. And then we're going to take a look at how that has played out on the international stage. Let's dive in. So purple martins at Walt Disney World, that's been a 25-year history of Disney trying to make a difference for this species. Now, it all started right here at Epcot, just around the corner from Disney's Animal Kingdom. And this was the very first location where a purple martin house went in. Now, it happened outside of this store called Mouse Gear that's now been renamed. And in fact, this particular garden is no more, but the purple martin houses are just down the block from where they were originally installed. And the colony there is still doing fabulously. But originally they went in as part of the Flower and Garden Festival. And in 1998, the organizers of that festival thought, you know, how can we really demonstrate how people can go above and beyond just planting beautiful landscapes to be able to make a difference for wildlife, as well as to create places of beauty that people enjoy as well. So they thought, you know what, Purple Martin House, great idea, great way to demonstrate how people can make a difference. The Purple Martins thought so too. They moved right in, and the rest is history. In the years since 1998, we've grown from that first house to we now have 22 houses spread all throughout Walt Disney World. We've got about half of them at Disney's Animal Kingdom. We've got a couple over at Disney's Magnolia Golf Course. Of course, Epcot continues strong with 5 houses. Disney's Caribbean Beach Resort and Disney's Saratoga Spring Resort and Spa each have 2 houses apiece as well. Now, in total, that's about 512 nesting compartments. It supports anywhere between 400 and 500 breeding purple martins every single year. Now, we didn't just want to stop, excuse me, with providing nesting habitat for those species. From the great example, the Purple Martin Conservation Association, we joined up with their Project Martin Watch program, and we've been monitoring those houses through the years to really be able to demonstrate and understand what the impact of purple martins of Walt Disney World is on local purple martin populations. So on the one hand, we've got folks on the right that you see, they're lowering those houses down and are following the individual stories of those birds all the way from nest building all the way through when they fledge. But on the top, you will also see somebody with binoculars. A flip side of our program focuses in on monitoring adults. A large number of our birds have been banded in the past. And so with that, we can learn about the individual behaviors of particular birds and starts to build histories out of when different individuals are arriving, what factors impact that, as well as how the whole nest building, nest site selection process plays out across Walt Disney World. Now, in the process of doing that, as much as we can, we bring guests to Walt Disney World alongside us for that journey. Again, this is a picture of Epcot. You'll see mouse gear there in the background, and you'll see that in the process of doing this research in an area where guests are freely coming and going, people that never expected to have a conservation experience get this up close and personal opportunity to see wildlife in a way that they may never have experienced before. So in this process, cast members get a chance to experience and be conservationists. They get a chance to take action. Now, in doing that, they have created that connection with this species, and that in turn creates inspiration, and that in turn leads to bigger, better action on their part. Now, this has played out in so many different people's stories that work for Disney, but I want to focus on 2 in particular. The first one on the left, now you might notice him from that scouting picture. This is Jordan Basner. He is a scout extraordinaire. He's been watching purple martins and putting together those stories of individual adults for many years now. And he fell in love with purple martins to the point that he convinced his HOA to put in a purple martin house in his community. Not only that, but he intentionally had that place right next to an elementary school on the border. And now Jordan, as part of those nest checks that he does on a weekly basis, he gets to deliver experiences, nest check experiences to the kids that attend that elementary school. Incredible scaled up impact because of his first connection, inspiration, and then action. A similar story on the right is Alex McMichael. He helps lead one of our teams that focuses on telling stories of nature conservation and connection and the animals at Disney's Animal Kingdom to all of our guests. Now, he has made it a point to help not only manage our Purple Martin houses, but to bring his cast member, his employees along for the ride to be part of that process. If that's not enough, he has also partnered with other cast members, and they've adopted community houses. And they are the ones that are monitoring those houses, that are out there and working with other banders to get their birds uniquely banded so that they can start to see the stories develop of those individual birds through time, as well as comboing that with how well those birds do, what the fate is of those different families of birds. Again, just 2 stories of how this scaling up impact happens at the level of our cast members. We don't just stop with monitoring, though. I mentioned earlier that we banned our purple martins, and that happens as part of an event that we call Purple Martin Palooza. At the end of April and the beginning of August every year, every single purple martin across Walt Disney World is captured, and each one gets a unique identification band. So we can see year on year who comes back where, who nests with who, if there's movement between different houses. All of our birds get a health check as well, and some of our birds get banded, or not banded, some of our birds get tracking devices as well to expand the impact, to expand our understanding of these birds beyond the borders of Walt Disney World. Now, because of this action that we take, again, that's created opportunities for connection and then inspiration with others. One of the most successful examples of this has been our partnership with Dr. Anna Forsman at the University of Central Florida. You'll see some talks from Dr. Anna later in the course of the conference as well. But she came down to the University of Central Florida having finished some of her work on tree swallows and was looking for a model system to dive into. And when she heard about purple martins and about the project going on at Disney's Animal Kingdom and the Walt Disney World Resort, she dove in with both feet, got houses put up throughout the University of Central Florida, and launched the University of Central Florida Purple Martin Project. And the rest has been history. We've been collaborating together on a whole suite of different projects that all fall under the umbrella of understanding, diving into a better understanding of the health of these birds and what we as landlords can do to try and best care for and manage our houses from that health perspective. So a student of hers as well, Stephanie Gaspar, is going to be presenting on some of their work too. So lots of good stuff to come from both of them. Now, that extended impact isn't just restricted to UCF and the Walt Disney World Resort as well. Through those tracking devices, we've begun to understand how birds are moving around the Central Florida landscape. So there's two stories I want to tell here. The first is that when birds are done nesting at Walt Disney World, as they do throughout their range, before they migrate, they gather together in these big pre-migratory roosts. Now, we never knew exactly where that pre-migratory roost was until we started putting these GPS devices out on our birds. And it turns out that you get this beautiful, clear signal of exactly where this bird is coming in to form its pre-migratory roost. This is on Snake Key in the Cedar Keys Wildlife Refuge. And these devices were taking points, one at night and one during the day. And so all of this cluster of points are the roost points. And then each one of these is a different place where this bird foraged during the day. Now, this was fantastic information, super excited. And having taken that action of putting the device on, now we're connected in with the folks over at the Cedar Keys Wildlife Refuge. And we thought, great, we'll go out, we're gonna make an expedition to this spot and we'll be able to see this roost in action. So we went out and it was a bit of a letdown because we only saw a couple thousand birds, but we were expecting many, many more. Based on weather radar, we knew that somewhere in this vicinity, there was a roost that was forming each year that was supporting tens of thousands of birds, not a couple thousand of birds. And so Dr. Anna, again, a partnership with her, has been working with a student to map out where those roost locations are. Turns out this roost shifts in location from year to year, but it is always within this same stretch of coastline right here. Now, fortunately, this stretch of coastline is all protected under a series of different protected areas, which is fabulous news. But again, this is creating that opportunity to create new collaborations with the land managers of this area to really dive in and understand these pre-migratory roosts and what it's going to take to keep them safe and secure long-term going into the future. The other story that I want to tell focuses in here. Now, right here is Walt Disney World, and you'll see that's the biggest cluster of points. But I also want to point out that you see some other locations where birds are going. Now, it turns out through our GPS work, we found that it's not unusual for purple martins with chicks to actually spend the night away from their nest compartment. Now, they're not just like popping out in the middle of the night and back. Based on GPS work, based on some pilot RFID work, they actually leave before sundown, spend the night elsewhere, and then right around sunrise come back. Now, one of the places that they're going are overpass lights over major freeway systems near Walt Disney World. On the right-hand side, this is an infrared video that I took of one of these freeway overpass lights at 5:16 a.m. The hour's a little off there. But an hour before sunrise, these birds were flying underneath this overpass light. Now, at their colony, birds typically don't start getting active until the sky starts lightening, starts becoming lighter. And so the question is, why are these birds flying around underneath this light? Well, one possibility is that the birds are actually foraging underneath these freeway overpass lights. So this could be a strategy for them to meet their caloric needs. And then first thing, when first light hits, they fly back to their colony. And I don't mean they meander back, I mean they beeline back. Those flights are so straight line that we've calculated the fastest travel speeds that we've seen for purple martins, upwards of 50 miles per hour. Absolutely incredible. Now we want to understand what the frequency of this behavior is. And so we're now putting out a new type of device, an accelerometer that records different types of behavior that's also outfitted with a light sensor. So we can tell if birds are starting to fly around before it's light out, if they're flying around right underneath one of these lights. Now, this is just getting started. We've tried out these devices at Walt Disney World. Joe actually tried them out up in Pennsylvania as well. And then we're going to have to work with another collaborator at Northern Arizona University, Lauren Buck, and some of his students to analyze these data. I can't wait. We'll have to have another Purple Martin conference right around the corner so I can share some of those results with you then. So those are some of the ways where action at Walt Disney World scaled up through this impact cycle to have impact and to create opportunities for research connection above and beyond Walt Disney World itself. But that has played out in terms of community engagement as well. Whether it is guests that come to Walt Disney World and see the Purple Martin Project, whether it is collaborators that we work with, like Dr. Anna, or whether it's direct connections, people in the surrounding community experience Purple Martins firsthand, and they get excited, and then they want to put up houses as well. So there have been a number of different Audubon societies, a number of private individuals that have all come to us and have added houses because of the work that we've done. This house that we're looking at here is actually at the Orlando Science Center. This is a house that was donated to the Science Center by the Walt Disney Company. And 2 years in, they successfully had their very first chicks. And they used this house to gather folks that were having lunch every single day and bring them out to experience firsthand the wonder of seeing chicks up close and this process playing out. So again, this cycle of impact is expanding out beyond where it started. Now, all of these different examples that I've given, again, have focused in specifically around Disney. Not so much what Disney alone did, but what happened next because of what started at Disney. And so now we're going to take that same lens and we're going to take a step back in time and focus, rather than in Central Florida, along the international journey that Purple Martins take from here down to South America and back. Everything that I have presented to you so far didn't start with Disney. We may have put the houses up first, but we weren't monitoring those houses. We weren't doing active research on them. It took Dr. Kevin Frazier and Bridget Stutchberry, Dr. Bridget Stutchberry, to reach out and say, hey, we're starting a new project. We want to create a network of sites throughout North America so that we can do one of the first studies on migration using the latest technology. And at that point, this was 2013, and we were just getting to the point where tracking devices were small enough that they could be deployed on a bird like a Purple Martin. Now, this was the very first addition here. These are geolocators. This is actually a little light sensor right here, coupled with a clock. And so it recorded very simply just when it got dark and when it got light. And with that, you could estimate within about 150 miles where that bird was. Now, that might not sound like very spatially explicit info, but when your bird migrates, for ours, for instance, 3,000 miles, or for birds much farther north, it's upwards of 5,000 miles down to South America, and then another 3,000 to 5,000 miles trip back, this gave us the first glimpse into how birds were moving across that landscape. It showed us where they were going. It showed us the timing, and we allowed us to start to parse out how there were differences at different breeding latitudes between these different locations. So Dr. Kevin Fischer, Dr. Bridget Stutchbury have led the charge on this work. And because of that, they really are responsible for the inspiration and the connection that led to all of the work at Walt Disney World since. We owe them a huge debt of gratitude. And that work continues on today with the latest and greatest versions of tracking devices. On our right, this was the very first type of GPS tracking device that was deployed, first in 2015. We'll come back to that one in just a second. But now the latest editions of those can collect thousands of points over the course of a year. And we'll actually get a chance to hear some of the latest and greatest findings coming from those from Kristen Lala later in the conference as well. But I want to return to this device here, the very first edition of these GPS devices. For the first time, we were able to see exactly where that bird was, where it roosted, where it overnighted, either on migration or down in the non-breeding grounds. So because of Kevin and Bridget's work, that created the connection and the inspiration to use this next generation of tracking device, and it gave us this first glimpse into where this bird went. Now, at that point, the batteries were so small that these devices could only gather a number of points that you can count on two hands. In fact, if you got all 10 points, you were having a banner year for that particular tag. Oftentimes it was less. Looks like this one has around 7. So this is a Disney Purple Martin, and this transmitter, this tracking device turned on July 15th. And you'll notice that this is circled right here. And then we got to follow this bird's movements along the Amazon River until it went back in December to Florida. Now, this bird, coupled with the other initial tags we got back, was a big surprise in terms of where these birds were spending the night. The common wisdom at that point is that birds gathered together into huge mega roosts, but were often found in towns because that's where people saw them and reported them. Groups of tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of purple martins in developed areas of the Amazon basin and in other locations of Brazil. But based on this tracking work, only 1/3 of the roost locations were in developed areas. So we decided to pull together the very first expedition to try and visit and find one of these natural roost locations that this particular bird, went to down in South America. And so Joe Segrist and Kevin Fischer and I all flew in and met up in Manaus, and we went on this overnight journey up the Rio Negro to this spot right here. Now, you'll notice that this looks fairly broad. You actually lose the perspective and scale in this picture. This area is 14 miles wide. And actually, you can't even see the island that we were aiming for because it was so tiny relative to the massive river that we were navigating. Now, you can tell from this photo that we worked really hard all the way along this trek to reach this island. But anticipation was building all along the way. And when we got there, we found nothing. Okay, that's not true. We found this gorgeous spit of a white sand beach, coupled with this low-lying shrub and low canopy trees. And it was about 1 mile long, but there was 0 goose eggs for purple martins. None there. This was really our first wake-up call and glimpse into the fact that the roosting ecology and the non-breeding behavior of these birds was far more complicated than we had thought based on those previous reports. Now, that might have sounded like a failed trip, but in fact, something actually much more valuable came out of this trip than whether or not we found purple martins at this location. And that was connections with Brazilian scientists at the Amazonian Institute, or I'm sorry, the National Institute of Amazonian Research, Dr. Mario Cohnhoft. And then at the Instituto Butantan, we met Dr. Erika Hingst. Now, those partnerships fueled conversations and inspired ongoing efforts to try and save this species, not just in North America, but in South America as well. We recognized very quickly that if our focus on this species was only based in North America, we were missing an entire half of the life cycle of this species. And so through these initial partnerships and connections, the International Purple Martin Working Group was born. And that connected researchers, conservationists, scientists from Canada all the way down into South America. Now we collectively, or the group collectively, put together a grant application to the Disney Conservation Fund, and that was able to launch the next step in this Purple Martin conservation and research journey that was based in South America. Now we're going to hear lots more from Mario and his students, Eliane and Jessica, about all the great work they're doing. They were able to do what Kevin, Joe, and I failed to do, and found a natural roost, a mega roost of hundreds of thousands of birds on the Rio Negro. And the images and videos that have come out of that work, as well as the research findings, have been absolutely phenomenal. And I'm not going to say any more, don't want to have any spoilers coming in. But it wasn't just Amazon-based research that came out of the International Purple Martin Working Group and this collaborative effort. We also brought in additional collaborators like Dr. Lauren Buck at Northern Arizona University, and you'll be hearing some of the results of that work from his student, Jonathan Branco, during the conference here too. But the final connection that I want to call out is one led by Dr. Erika at the Instituto Butantan. So she and her students took a step beyond just focusing on field research. And they really looked to how they could connect with the birders of Brazil and build an inspiration and empower them to help figure out the mystery of where purple martins were going. And so they created a community science project and a place where all sightings of purple martins could be tabulated, recorded, and gathered together. Now, this was the birth of Proyecto Andorinha Azul, and I apologize to my Brazilian colleagues because they always make fun of me for my awful Portuguese pronunciations, but hopefully you got a laugh out of that one. So what came out of that work, I'm not going to, again, give all the spoilers. You'll have to come to Clarissa's talks, one of Erika's students. But what came out of that work, or part of it, was this map that you see below. And you'll see that these sightings kind of group into two areas. One of them is roughly based around the Amazon basin and just south of the Amazon basin. And that, in conjunction with all of the tracking work led by Kevin, all knit together to say that the eastern subspecies of purple martins are all heading to that particular area. Now, there are two other subspecies of purple martins as well. One of them breeds throughout the Intermountain West in small pockets, but they reach their largest numbers in Northern California and Oregon, Washington, and up into British Columbia. Now, based on a very small amount of tracking work there, it looks like that subspecies might be responsible for part of this other set of sightings all along the eastern coastline of Brazil. But there's another subspecies that we know virtually nothing about, and that is the desert purple martin that breeds down in the southwestern US and northwestern Mexico. Now, that realization was the impetus for the International Purple Martin Working Group to reach out to the Tucson Audubon Society. And in building that connection and in talking about the lack of knowledge around the desert purple martin, that got the Tucson Audubon Society fired up and excited. And led by the efforts of Jonathan Horst, who again will be telling us about the latest and greatest of this project, they launched their own community science project to recruit the birders of southwestern or of Arizona to help them in the most detailed and in-depth study of purple martin biology, of desert purple martin biology to date. And that was just the starters. That group also applied for a Disney Conservation Fund grant and got it. And now they're looking to expand out much beyond just the basics of that community science project. Jonathan will tell us much more about that. I look forward to hearing about the latest progress for that project. Through this talk, you've seen examples, numbers of examples, of how Disney conservation action has led to connections that ultimately inspired additional action. The great thing about this, though, is this is just the snippet of how Disney has been involved. And at this conference, we get to see and experience so many additional examples of this cycle of impact playing out to create bigger and better change on behalf of this species and on the part of people as well. And really, to me, that's what the heart of this conference is all about. This is the next action step of all of us collectively being here, participating in this conference. And together, we are going to build connections that ultimately and hopefully will inspire those next steps of conservation action. What do those steps look like? What are the big research questions that out of this remain unanswered that we need to tackle next? How can we leverage our projects, our connections to surrounding communities to reach out and create opportunities for other communities to partake and participate and be part of this Purple Martin Conservation Research Project as well? If we do that across our collective projects, this cycle of impact will continue to expand and to grow. And a planet possible future where purple martins are no longer on the decline, but are thriving throughout the range is not just going to be a possibility, but it's going to be a future reality. With that, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this talk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Jason, I see a question in the chat, and that's actually what I was going to ask as well, in a roundabout way. How long until we convince you to pull the strings and get a purple martin in an animated Disney movie? Come on.
All right, the challenge, the gauntlet has been thrown down, Joe. So, we'll have to see what I can do. You can measure my success as a conservationist from this moment. How long does it take for me to get to the point that a purple martin is in an animated movie?
Perfect. All right, so there was another question in chat for those of you who didn't see it. How many purple martin houses do you have behind the scenes at Animal Kingdom? I believe that's where the majority of your purple martin houses are, correct?
Yeah, so we've got 22 houses in total across Walt Disney World. 9 of those are kind of behind the scenes. And so that's kind of the basis for a lot of the more in-depth research that we do. And then we do a simplified version of research that's not quite as time intensive across all of the houses at Walt Disney World.
And you had a little bit of like Nest Cam video at the beginning of that. What that wasn't from a kind of publicly broadcasted Nest Cam. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what that footage was from?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was actually a pilot project in collaboration with Microsoft. So we came together to be honest, it was really fun to see Heather Williams's talk because it was kind of an early stage, unconnected from her project, asking the question, if you take a purple martin house and you try and dial the techno connections up to 10, create a purple martin smart house, what can you accomplish with that? And so we created this house that had 2 sensor arrays. One was looking down at the porch, and one was on the cap of the gourd looking into the nest compartment. And so each of those measured an array of environmental variables, so temperature and humidity, air pressure, and then it was coupled with, with an HD camera. And then on the machine learning, artificial intelligence side, we worked to develop and see how far or what we could identify in terms of unique different biological events of interest. And so that project worked through as a pilot study, and the conclusion was, yes, we can do it. But then the pandemic hit, and as with so many other things, that project got put on hold. So I don't know if we'll see a future expanded version of that project in the future, but it'd be pretty fantastic.
I got a question here in chat. It looks like it came directly to me, but I'll relay it because I believe it was for you. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to tee up you guys' fledgling little Purple Martin group in Florida. It says, it's from Brent. It says, it's great to see the expansion of the houses to include the Orlando Science Center and UCF. Are there other locations in Florida?
Oh, so many other locations. So one thing that I didn't explicitly say in the talk is that, a next, action step for us in that impact cycle is to try and connect the different landlords across Central Florida. And the goal there is to build those connections with the idea of being able to learn from each other, share best practices across all of those different landlords, but also be able to leverage that landscape scale network of houses to be able to ask research questions that we simply couldn't get at before. It was so much fun listening to Glenn's talk, because he's at the far northern extreme of Purple Martin's range. We're on the exact opposite, almost as far south as you can get in their range. And so being able to build that network and then leverage those awesome landlords to be able to ask research questions that you need that landscape scale network to address, that's a big part of this as well. And I think another huge opportunity, I alluded to it in the talk, is that there are so many communities that I think would be so excited to plug in and be part of this kind of work, but they might not have the resources or the ability to do that, or simply that they don't have the knowledge. And so creating that kind of network creates the support structure and potentially fundraising structure to be able to help bring in communities that are excited about this kind of work that just need a little help to get the ball rolling, to get things started. So building that network, advancing landscape scale conservation, and then sharing best practices to collectively improve how we, the kind of impact each and every one of those houses can have on Purple Martin conservation. That's what we're excited about trying to build next around here.
Well, it looks like you may already have a addition to the group from Terry in chat. We manage houses in Sarasota. How do we connect with your group?
Oh, that's fantastic. So I can put my email address in the chat as soon as the Q&A portion wraps up. And yeah, reach out. Love to chat.
Perfect. All right. Final question here from Mario. He says, awesome talk, Dr. J. Can you share with us a bit of your vision on how we might get from here to a future of burgeoning Purple Martin populations in healthy environments all over?
Oh,
kind
way
of a
to
big
tee
question.
up the big question there, Mario.
Thanks, Mario.
So I don't know if this is what Mario was thinking of when he posed this question, but something else we've been noodling on in the International Purple Martin Working Group is putting together a conservation plan to identify what some of the big remaining gaps in knowledge are, as well as what are those big actions needed to try and advance conservation of Purple Martins at scale. And so there's some things on the research side that we are just at the front end of figuring out. One of the strangest, or I shouldn't say strangest, one of the biggest challenges with Purple Martin conservation is, despite the fact that there have been such significant and big declines, we don't yet have that's the thing. There is a simple, clear, one cause answer of what is driving that. If we had that, conservation would be a whole lot easier. We could mobilize resources, focus right there, knock it out, throw the football down and do our victory dance. But it's way more complicated than that. either there are factors that we haven't investigated yet, or it's a much more complicated interacting set of factors driving that. So one is investigating the interplay between landscape change and prey availability. And so I know that there are a number of different folks that are right at the front end of looking at those questions of how martins use landscape, what they're eating, what the consequences of that are on nesting success, both at very local sites as well as scaled up to larger areas. Dr. Lauren Buck's team is leading the charge on looking into environmental contaminants. To my knowledge, only the first couple studies, just scratching the surface of a couple potential contaminants, have been done. And that whole area of research, it could be our version of Silent Spring for martins. It could be that there's been silent killers that we're not aware of that have been driving massive impact to purple martins. And we just haven't known because we didn't know to look, but we're looking now. So over the next few years, we'll start to get the answers to the role of environmental contaminants. I think that another major area of work, we've already heard some talks around roosting ecology and understanding the drivers of why martins roost where they do. That info is essential for us to be able to protect networks of areas so that those roost sites, those key roost sites, are going to be protected through time. Let's see, we talked prey, we talked environmental contaminants, we talked here about roosting. I think the questions about how people manage their houses is another major area. So, I mentioned that in Central Florida, Anna is leading a ton of work to ask questions around the health of martins and connecting those answers to best management practices. How we do that and how we share that out is going to be critical to maximizing the benefit that we can have on purple martins. And the flip side of that is further building in those and advocating for those networks of martins in areas where the landscapes can support much larger numbers of houses. That combo of housing in the right spots with managing those houses in the best way possible, that collectively, we got a lot of work to do, but we've got the big roadmap that we can follow to make that difference in the years and decades to come. Joe, you've got job security.
Yeah, well, as long as the board's okay with it. But yeah, you did a great job teeing up the rest of the conference, basically. So thank you, Jason, for pointing out how important the talks that we've already have are, and the talks that we're going to have. I think we have talks that touch on a little bit of how our research partners and other researchers that we've just kind of pulled in for the conference are trying to look in all these different directions at what's going on. So with that, I think Jason will let you off the hook. Jason, any final words?
I am just so grateful for the opportunity to chat with you, as well as for all the speakers. You mentioned that I teed up so many different folks, and that is a result and a recognition of the fact that the great work that this association does, and of all of these different individuals, the power here is in all of us doing this work together to move conservation of this species forward. So thank you to all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. I love this crew of research that we've put together, and all of the landlords that are working so hard on their end to provide housing for this species that needs it so much.